Having amazing terrain can absolutely transform your experience playing Warhammer 40k. Nobody wants to play on cardboard cutouts, broken pink hills, pieces of paper, when you have amazing 3D printed terrain from Terrainify at your disposal. This beautiful terrain comes fully built and painted in one of 22 different camo settings. You can also get it unpainted so you can make it your own hobby project, as well as just the printed STL files, so that way you can print them at home yourself. Terrainify has so many different kinds of boards. They have different themes for whatever kind of battle you could possibly want to create. We've used Terrainify in our games to play very functional, high-level competitive Warhammer. This terrain is both beautiful, fun to play with, and very user-friendly. Terrainify is on a mission to elevate the quality of terrain that people play with worldwide. If you want to play on better terrain, you can support them directly on Patreon for just $3 a month. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to Terrainify.com, use discount code ArtofWar25 for 25% off your order, and start creating the boards you've always wanted to play on. Tier List Tuesday, everybody! Everybody's favorite day of the week. You know that's my favorite day. And Siegs' favorite day. Why? Because everybody loves Tuesdays. Best day of the year. It happens 52 times.
Best day of the year.
Got so many tier lists for you. Speaking of which, today we're going to be ranking all the stratagems in the game. Yeah, there's a lot. We actually opened up all of the codexes and rulebooks, and holy crap, there's more than like 6. I can't even count that high, but we went through them.
There's honestly too many. There's just dramatically too many.
There's way too many stratagems in this game.
So there is a chance that we missed some critical ones somewhere.
No, there's no chance of that.
We found a lot of really, really good ones, and we tried to... First, we started with the qualifier of we want to pick stratagems that kind of define a faction and elevate them to an entirely new level. And then Nick was like, what about all these generic strats that are in there? Because I was focusing on factions. And I was like, I mean, great point. There's a lot of amazing generic stratagems.
Like the command point reroll.
I don't know about that. But we had a list of over 25 of them. We kind of narrowed it down. So there's going to be a couple honorable mentions. And then we grouped a couple together. So if a stratagem is very similar to a couple other ones, we've lumped them together as this type of stratagem.
Yeah.
And you'll see that as we go on.
As always, we're viewing this from the lens of competitive 40k. Here on this channel, we focus pretty much entirely on competitive 40k, helping you get better and helping teach competitive 40k and make it more enjoyable for all of you. So we're not really taking into account the accuracy of how the units get used in the lore, or how cool the stratagem is, or the bonus flashy points you get for pulling it off in the game. Those are real, though. We are focused entirely on the competitive value of the stratagem for this analysis. Let us know what you think in the comments. You know, if you disagree with Siegs, when you agree with me, let us know. We need to hear that. Tell us how handsome we are. We got to know that as well. Like the video, subscribe to our channel. It really lets us keep producing this kind of content for you, and that means the world to us. We love producing this content.
We love it. I was the originator of Tier List Tuesday. Nick didn't actually remember that. But
well, you don't even remember what day it is.
I know exactly what day it is.
It's Tier List Tuesday, everybody. That's right.
So this should be a pretty exciting one. I think there's going to be a lot of debate about the ranking of where we put things. I think realistically, a lot of these could have been swapped a couple different places, but we had to decide on some particular order. But hopefully you agree. Now, the first thing we want to start with here is the command point reroll.
We could not agree on this.
Nick is adamant that this is one of the 10 best stratagems in the game. I am adamant that people who use the CP reroll constantly are making a grave error.
Like with any stratagems, there's a time and a place, and you know there's a lot of times you're rolling dice in 40k where you could use your CP reroll strat. You realistically shouldn't. You really should not use it on small stuff.
It doesn't stop Nick from doing it though.
But there are things that just matter in 40k. Like when you go through your turns, you set up your plays. You're trying to accomplish certain goals throughout your turn. Like I need to hit this charge. I really towards the end of your opponent's shooting phase, I really need to hold this objective. I'm gonna reroll that last save. It's a 3-up. You know, it's pretty likely to pass. Sometimes it's got a lot of value. That's why it should be on this list.
So, from my perspective, the CP Reroll is a chance to potentially swing the game in your favor, but it's no guarantee. Almost every other strat on here, when you spend the CP, it is a guarantee you get this effect, which is why I hate stratagems that are on a 3-up, you do XY effect. Those stratagems are complete garbage, because there's a chance that you don't do anything whatsoever, and I don't want to be spending command points on that. Most factions in the game have enough stratagems where there's tremendous value in just using those particular strats over and over again. So, from my perspective, I want to spend CP on guaranteed plays. And then I set up enough safety nets where if a plan fails, I have a backup, and I don't really care. If that particular one fails, I've already set up 2 different ones that are my safety net to make sure that even if things go wrong, I'm still in a good position. And that's kind of my playstyle, and that's why I just barely ever use the command point reroll. This would have to be a huge point swing for me to even consider it.
This is definitely, what you're describing.
It's philosophically different.
It's philosophically, you're trying to mitigate the dice in 40k, go for things that are guaranteed, not let dice steal your command points. It's just, to me, sometimes you need to make sure your plays go off. Plays inherently have risk in 40k. Like, every time you're not standing behind your wall and doing nothing, you could cast a psychic power, roll a charge. You know my psychic powers. Roll a charge. Hit with your railgun. There's tons of things in 40k that just, you really want them to work, and they are warranting CP, in my opinion.
But that's how I have redundancy of firepower. One railgun misses, the second 2 hit.
The real answer is you don't even include railgun seeks. Don't lie to me.
Well, railguns have a free reroll to hit, so I don't really care about rerolling that.
It was an example. It was definitely an example.
I have to be John here, though, so I have to get technical.
Of course you do. Of course.
But where would you put it in this list? See, it wouldn't be on any of mine.
This is where we really disagreed, because when you were going through your list, you went from the top to the bottom, meaning you started with the first number 1 stratagem in the game, and we're working our way back into the honorable mention category. And right around number 3 or 4, I was like, in my head mentally, where is he putting the CP reroll? But I was letting you finish your diatribe of how you organized your thoughts. And then towards the end, it became very apparent that Siegs just put this thing off the list.
No, I didn't even consider it. I just deleted it.
That's why we're having this conversation right now.
So, I mean, it's worthwhile. Some people just have a very different philosophy on the strats, and CP reroll is one of those. There are tons of players who just use it constantly. Almost every single turn. That's like their primary stratagem. I pretty much never use it, so I wanted to start this tier list with that. So it's not on this agreed upon tier list.
It's not.
It's not on here.
Well, that's why we agreed on the rest of the tier list, but we could not agree on that. Well, let us know if you think the CP reroll is in the top 10 strats of the game, or the best one, or the most useful one, or the critical one that you should never leave home without.
Or if you think you should always be spending CP on guaranteed plays like I do.
Like, in an ideal world, yeah, but 40k is not a guaranteed game.
When I play it, it's close.
You know what is guaranteed, though? This honorable mention coming up, numero uno. This isn't actually on the list, but it's definitely worth a mention.
So this is the emergency disembarkation stratagem. This is one where you may not see it too often, but it's very much the threat of having access to this changes how people play. And the reason is because, especially on some larger transports like Drukhari Raiders, anything with a lot of, length to it, so the Admech transport, the Dune Rider, you can get out when your transport destroyed 6 inches away instead of 3. And 6 inches is a massive difference. It's pretty easy to wrap transports fully with 1 unit and block it so people can't easily get their models out. But with this stratagem, it's very hard to wrap entirely within 6. You need multiple units. They need to be strung out all over the place. It requires a ton of setup. And this stratagem, in my opinion, makes transport-heavy lists much more viable at the top level, where wrapping transports is a very common advanced tactic.
I would say it's even useful not just for wrapping transport, but just for extending the area that which you can disembark from. Back at ATC, when I was playing the good old-fashioned triple Tantalus, these things are 16 model transports that are enormous in circumference. They take up so much table space. So when your opponent inevitably blows them up on the top of turn 1 every single game, you have the ability to emergency disembark these things all over the place. Like, I could have racks piling out over here. I could have racks piling out over here. I'm in Siegs' screen and my screen at the same time right now. That's how big the Tantalus are. So you can really, be behind walls that your opponents didn't think you could get behind, get onto an objective on the other side. Not only is it great for the emergency part of the disembarkation where you need to do it to survive, but also just increasing your disembark range for 1 CP at the cost of a few extra guys. Very useful.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I pretty much only use this strat when I'm about to swing an objective, when I have OBSEC inside a transport and getting it. The transport's not exactly on the objective, and it's several inches away, but by threatening to use this, I'll get OBSEC out, they can't interact with that unit after that, and then I get a swing on 12 on primary. That's kind of where I mostly use it, but it's a really good defensive stratagem in the fact that your opponent is going to have a hard time actually trapping those units inside.
Yeah. This strat's great. There's a lot of great strats on here. Like the next one.
So next honorable mention is one that if you're familiar with Chaos Knights, you probably see all the time because it is a kind of faction-defining stratagem. Nick has been brutally impacted by this one. Ravenous Terror Shades.
I'll even go so far as to say is I've played against a lot of Chaos Knight players, not just like John over here, and this strat is probably underutilized. It is one of the best strats you have access to, Ravenous Terror Shades. Let me break it down for you. In the morale phase, before you actually take your morale check, we're going to roll a dread test, which is 2d6 versus your leadership. And then Chaos Knights just do bad things to your leadership. You're near them, it sucks. It's not good. And then if they ally demons, just forget it. You don't even have leadership. So you're just rolling 2d6, and you take that many mortals. But you compare it to your leadership, and the difference is how many mortals you take. And then if you have the Warlord trait, which not every Chaos Knight runs, you're going to roll 3d6, pick the 2 highest on that leadership test. And that's, you're just taking mortals. And the timing of this is really what gets me every time. Because what happens is, I like to move block Chaos Knights personally. They're a very big, clunky, base, non-fly army. Very, very move blockable. It's a great tactic. We teach it in the War Room. And then John, and thankfully not other Chaos Knight players that I've experienced, but John will use Ravenous Terror Shades to clear my screen a little bit in the mortal phase, in the morale phase. Then guess what? I have to take a morale check, and all of a sudden my move block is gone. My objective contest is gone. The whole thing falls apart in your hands. You're trying to retrieve battlefield data. Guess what? That 5-man unit that was going to do it very likely, it's a 2-man unit. Have fun. It's just rough pumpkins.
And it happens multiple times throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, and it's 1 CP, it's super spammable. Did you know you could use it in both your morale phase and your opponent's morale phase? Just put all your command points into Ravenous Terror Shades.
Yeah, I've seen them do it. And frankly, when you start adding minuses to leadership, you can frankly do an absurd amount of mortal wounds.
I really don't understand why this strat is not typically talked about or seen competitively, but it is awesome sauceum robots.
You have to play around this, and this is why I value being able to ignore leadership modifiers in the current meta. Not this.
Look, you even take Inspiring on your Necron army.
Well, Necrons don't have Warlord traits, so +1 leadership.
This isn't about Necrons. This is about Inspiring.
It's always about Necrons.
No, you know what it's about? It's about Ricky Chow's Super Chat, $4.99. Hello, Ricky. Thank you for your support. Hold up for a minute. I love you guys. Shout out to my boy Overcharged Laz Cells at the top. Overcharged Laz Cells is making this list. Maybe.
It's definitely making this list. Where it's going to be, you're going to find out. But that is the Mortal Strat from Guard, and you're going to see it.
Ricky Chow, thanks so much for your support.
All right, heading over to now the number 10 slot. This is another one that Nick is a big fan of in his suite of Chaos Stratagems. Honor the Prince.
Honor the Prince. I was actually just working on the Chaos Masterclass video series we're releasing in the War Room right now, where I very much talk about how amazing the strat is. To break it down for all of you ladies and gentlemen in the chat over here, you can basically spend 1 command point in either your movement phase or your charge phase for your Emperor's Children army. This is an Emperor's Children specific strat. Mm-hmm. And you can turn the die before you roll it on your advanced roll to a 6. That's amazing for getting to very specific spots like objectives. You ever wish you rolled higher on an advanced roll to make objectives? Just make it. Now, don't forget, you can also advance and charge in Emperor's Children because the Slanesh Dark Apostle chant is going to be advance and charge. So then, I'm just auto-advancing 6. Look how close I am to the enemy. But you know what? You can also use it on that charge die. Only one of your 2. So basically, you're going to, before you roll your charge, it's normally 2d6. Now it's going to be 6. You're just going to take one of those dice and just turn it into a 6. 6 is Slanesh's number. And then you're going to add a d6 to it. So minimum charge 7, average charge 9.5. Not even that bad to hit a 12 or 11 charge, especially when you consider the CP reroll. is a great strat. Honor the Prince, super duper awesome. Super duper rock'em sock'em robots. Great strat.
It used to be more bonkers in 8th edition, but it's still amazing. And the fact that it's 1 CP is just value town where you can spam it throughout the game. You're going to use this multiple times to make sure plays happen. This is just a play that could be, this is going to go off like 75% of the time. Now you're like, okay, this is going to go off almost every single time.
You could literally take a unit that has no reserve charge bonuses whatsoever, like say 10 Terminators or Warp Talons or whatever, and deep strike it in, strategic reserve it for free in, like your Noise Marines, and just show up 9 inches away from the enemy, nonchalantly. Honor the Prince, all you have to do is roll a 3 on a single d6 to hit the charge, 1/3 chance of failure, fret not, CP Reroll. Now it's an 8/9 chance of success. That's where you should use it.
Yep, and Chaos is pretty much an army that does need to make their charges because the army doesn't shoot that hard. So this is critical to kind of the speed of the army and reliability of their charges. Great stratagem.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So going down the list, numero 9.
Boom, it's the Desperate Breakout. Now you might be saying, how many times have you actually played against somebody who's used Desperate Breakout? We don't use it that often on stream. I don't see it used often in top table games. And the reason that you use this strat is when your unit is physically surrounded such that it can't move out. This is usually non-fly units, although with degrading fly units, you could potentially pull crazy plays off. But if you trap something in combat and they need to get out, well, they're going to use Desperate Breakout. The power of this stratagem is the fact that it simply exists as something you can access. So for a Tau, an army that doesn't really have much combat like Tau, this strat is a complete game changer. You can put a screening unit out there, crude hounds, whatever it is, that doesn't have fly. If they end up getting wrapped very cleverly by your opponent, tri-pointed, trapped, prevented from being able to fall back normally, having access to this strat can ruin a plan, because what people want to do is they want to tri-point you, they want to send their whole army into that combat through pile-ins and consolidate so they don't swing on the unit, and then you're like, cool, my home army's stuck there, and the Tau player's fight phase will kill that unit, and then pile in, consolidate, get into their deployment zone, and you pretty much just win the game off that play. Desperate Breakout prevents that from happening. Now, it is 2 CP, so you always want to be staying at 1, so at the start of each command phase, you go up to 2 to potentially use this in an army that could, have a weakness to being tri-pointed in combat. But this is a huge reason that pure shooting armies can actually exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, stratagems, Desperate Breakout's amazing. In 8th edition, you did not have access to this. It didn't exist. If you got trapped, sucks to be you. And it really forced armies like Tau to run almost 100% fly as their archetype. Like things like Crew, you couldn't take them because they just get trapped. It really created situations where the game became, does a combat army trap a shooting army? And like if it does, that's the game. It's very tactical at that level, and it's very... If it happens, the game's over for one person. If it doesn't happen, it's over for the other. In 9th edition, because this stratagem simply exists, people don't really make strategies based around trapping the opponent in close combat, and therefore you don't have to use it that often. But because its existence is there, it's so powerful.
Yeah, it's game-changing in that sense by simply existing. Now your opponent has to pull off a double or triple wrap, and those plays get increasingly more complex and difficult as you go up this skill level.
I think we'd also be remiss not to talk about John's favorite tactic, because he would talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
So when you have this thing like a transport rat, this is John Lennon 101 over
Sister's
here.
Rhino.
Sister's Rhino. You wrap the Rhino up so the multi-melted Retributors can't just blow you up when they get out next turn. This is awesome. I've done this to them. And then all of a sudden this Rhino Desperate Breakouts, right? And you're like, okay, whatever. The Rhino's moved. You can't disembark now. Guess what? The Rhino can Desperate Breakout and then still finish within an inch of the enemy. It just moves to the other side. And then, guess what? You're within an inch of the enemy, so you're dead. Because that's what it says in the stratagem.
Yep.
Poor Rhino is dead. Woohoo! I killed the Rhino. Unfortunately, all of those multi-melta Retributors just pile on out of there. Maybe you lose a couple of them. Oh no! And then the multi-meltas are just in front of your army with line of sight and range and half range and miracle dice, and then you're a sad panda.
And they didn't fall back.
They didn't fall back.
They did not make a fallback move.
They sure didn't. They sure didn't.
So there is some jank to the stratagem. That's probably wasn't seen when they created it, but it is rules as written, and nobody has that's just how it's played.
That's how it is.
It hasn't been FAQ'd or anything like that. So very powerful tool to help shooting units get out of transports.
All right, let's go through another strat. Numero 8.
Boom. Insane Bravery. This is one of my personal favorites. I Almost. I just use it like every army that I have. I save CP for this.
Yeah, the CP you spent to save one model on a morale check through Insane Bravery is what I like to dump into CP rerolls.
But I swing the primary on
You
this
swing
fight.
no, you are just terrified of losing models to morale, my friend.
I don't want to lose any models tomorrow. So this is the 2 CP auto pass. It is once per game. You cannot use this multiple times. If I could, I totally would. But it's once per game. It's 2 CP, so it's a little pricey. But I am the type of guy to run large units of objective secured that wants to stand all over the objectives. My opponent wants to put all their damage into it. I want those models to survive as much as possible. So armies like Necrons, Admech, absolutely love this. Although Admech have a 1 CP strat that in certain circumstances supersedes this one for auto passing morale. But having access to this is, I am going to make a play work. Yeah, it might be a little swingy where not every model is going to survive at the end of this, but I just need 1 or 2 OBSEC bodies to survive on this objective. I'm going to swing the primary in my favor, make sure I take down their banner, whatever it is. This stratagem allows those plays to be consistent. Because you're not going to just lose the whole unit in morale.
It's a great pocket strat. You don't plan your game unless you're running these 20-man bricks of warriors or things like that around using Insane Bravery. But there's like times where your opponent shoots and you have 1 model left on objective, 2 models left on objective, even 3 models left on objective, and you have to take that morale check. And it's not likely you'll fail. You know, you fail on, say, a 5 or 6 on your d6, and then you have to roll a 1 or 2 to run away with the last guy. And then if you roll the 5 or 6, followed by the 1 or 2, you run away, you lose primary, your opponent gets a 12, you get a 0. It's ugly. So instead of taking that risk, which, you know, it could just be a dice game where you roll the dice and we'll see what happens. Instead, we're going to just mitigate those dice and say, I'm going to pass it. And for that reason, it is so fundamentally game-changing because it just takes the risk out of 40k.
Yep. And like I said, it's not used all the time, but once again, as is the case with these generic strats, it's the having access to it can completely change a turn.
Yeah. A lot of times I'll try to make my opponent just spend 2 CP on Insane Bravery, and Ziggs typically will. But, you know, that's a great use of the strat, holding an objective with it.
Also, if you have an army that can modify leadership very well or combat attrition, you can try and get them to burn the auto pass early, Insane Bravery, and then later in the game they don't have access to it, and it can be huge swings in your favor.
Because it is once per game.
Exactly.
And you could play Undivided Chaos Space Marines, and then you have a 1 CP strat that tells your opponent that they can't use the Insane Bravery strat.
I don't like that.
You don't like that.
I don't like that one bit. All right, so that's Insane Bravery sitting in at the 8th spot. Moving on to number 7. So this is going to be the first of us using an archetype of strats together. So this is the suite of fight on death strats. We picked 2 different examples here. One is Orcs is Never Beaten, which is when one of their characters dies, they can fight on death. There's a lot of armies in the game that have a fight on death or shoot on death for a character unit.
Yep.
This is trying to represent that. And then Desperate for Redemption is for Repentia specifically in the Adeptus Sororitas. And there are other units in the game that can access a fight on death strat for them. But we're putting them all together here as having access to fight on death stratagems. I believe that Tyranids with Behemoth have a fight on death strat as well. John likes that with his Tyrant card.
Fight on death. Harlequins have fight on death. Chaos has fight on death. People fight on death. People fight when they die.
Yeah,
you know,
sometimes it's inbuilt into their data sheet, but there's a lot of it, and especially in the earlier books, it was built into stratagems.
It still is built in strats. You know, Emperor's Children, Harlequins, they all got it. The power of this strat is basically that it creates swings when your opponent's not expecting swings. Or, I mean, obviously they don't have access to the strat, but maybe they can't do anything about it. So let's take an example of the super awesome Orc War Boss. You have like 400 of these you can create in Orcs. And it's hard to shoot this guy because obviously he benefits from Lookout Sir. So he's going to connect with your army probably on turn 2 after calling the Wog, and he's going to hit something super hard. And if your answer to killing him is by charging him, since shooting him can oftentimes be very, very difficult, then you're really going to be forced into walking into this fight on death head first. And especially in the context of Orcs, you can do it on kill rigs, you could do it on so many different characters. And then Repentia, it just means like a common tactic in 40k is you charge your opponent's unit, and then you kill them, and you use that distance you gain off killing them and charging them to move across the table a little bit more, contest an objective, create yourself a screen, occupy the space that they were once standing in because it's now a beneficial fought over space. And what Fight on Death does, it says, Your screen's not getting created, which could create problems down your line. This objective isn't yours after you kill me. It's pretty much nobody's, unless maybe I put more stuff there or you put more stuff there. And it just creates all kinds of headaches in the planning. It also means units can trade up. So like those Repentia can run across the table with Miracle Dice, destroy something really important, and then get charged and destroy another really important thing on the way out. And that trade is a 2-for-1. 2-for-1 trades are just money in 40k.
Exactly. And World Eaters coming into the game now with their new codex, they have a fight on death one as well, which is just it's critical because there's a lot of the top armies have multiple melee components, and there are often turns where you want to threat overload your opponent. But with fight on death axis, it's very hard to threat overload somebody because you're going to go ahead, swing somewhere, they're going to fight on death on one of the units, and then they can use the counteroffensive stratagem to interrupt somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, it basically kind of is a free version of the counteroffensive strat. It's not quite as good because your unit is going to die in the process of using this strat, but it is like getting an interrupt off in addition to an interrupt.
Exactly. So like they swing with their first unit, you interrupt, and then whenever they attack the unit that has fight on death, you just spend that there, and all of a sudden they might have had an actually horrible fight phase, losing a lot of resources.
Now, the one thing that really keeps this strat in check is that shooting armies don't even experience it. Like, I'm just going to shoot the Repentia, but then what are they going to do? Fight the air? That's not going to help.
Exactly.
So it's not... Every army is not infinitely affected by this. But when you do have to fight the orcs in close combat, oh man, it's a brutal path.
Exactly.
Speaking of brutality,
the next one is also kind of a suite of type of stratagems, and that is going to be the pre-game redeployment style stratagems, like rapid redeployment from Ultramarines and Phantasm from Eldar are some of the two prime examples, and then pre-game move stratagems like Forlorn Fury, which lets Death Company get up the board, and if they get first turn, they can send Death Company straight into your deployment zone and hit you extremely hard. So being able to interact with your opponent before they really get to do very much, yes, they get to deploy their army and try and screen it as best as possible, but this alone can force them to play so defensive that you don't even have to take full advantage of these rules because they're so far back, they're at such a defensive position that you immediately get a huge advantage on the mission and pacing.
It's really, really powerful when you combine them with fast units or units that can start outside of their deployment zone. So in the case of Ultramarines, you can infiltrate, say, 3 Invictors right on your opponent's line, 9 inches away, maybe with some infiltrators too. And then if you go first, guns to the face. And if you go second, just take those Invictors and redeploy them right back into your own deployment zone, nice and out of line of sight, and play a more control-based game with your bottom of turn advantage. If you're playing Eldar, you're ridiculously fast. You can deploy right onto the exact spot you want to at the very edge of your deployment zone, move 20 inches, blast somebody in the face, no hiding away from that. So you can really lay alpha strikes into somebody with it with an aggressive redeploy, or you can come back to safety with a defensive redeploy.
Yeah.
Also, you might see a lot of tactics where somebody deploys half their army aggro and half their army defensive and adjust the half based on if they find out they're going first or second.
Yep, I know you prefer doing that, where you put a couple elements aggressive, and then you're like, going second, back in, or I'm going first, 3 more units up front.
yeah. We're going to adjust this. I'm playing with 6 units the way I want, not just 3 with Phantasm. And then Forlorn Fury, it actually is another strat like this in Alpha Legion as well for CSM, but this is basically allowing you to pre-game move a unit before the game starts. And what you want to do with this is really take a very hard-hitting close combat unit, like, say, 5 Death Company with 4 Thunderhammers or 5 Thunderhammers, and move them up to behind line of sight blocking terrain in midfield. What this is going to do is if you're going first, you can then continue on and press your attack, buff them all up, send them in, and just like trade for whatever you want, whatever your opponent is giving you. If there's a worthwhile trade like a knight, go take a knight out turn 1. These things hit ludicrous. And then if they don't have a worthwhile target for you to attack, you can just set up camp. You're already in midfield. If your opponent is going first, maybe you obviously don't attack them on your first turn because they have first turn. And now your opponent's got this situation where they have to figure out how they're going to walk up the table because any sort of movement forward is going to get them slammed by Thunderhammers and Death Company. So it's a really good staging before the game even begins.
Exactly. And now your opponent has to be very clever in deployment, just trying to screen and create a layered approach to block off those potential charges. But in doing so, they're not deploying in their ideal fashion to be set up to play the mission.
At the top level, these strats define how the game is played in the early turns and really influence a lot of decisions. At the mid tables and below the mid tables, these strats probably end games turn 1.
It also impacts list design. So I know myself, I am very fearful of these forward deploying units, especially if they redeploy like Ultramarines. Because guess what you can do right now? You take 5 infiltrators, and let's talk about mission 22, mission 32, table quarters. Okay, 5 of them 9 inches away from your deployment zone. Now they cleared that spot. Now they're going to put 3 Invictor warsuits right there. And if you don't have any way to interact with that, and they go first, you are getting blown up.
I had a phase where I was playing demons, and I just refused to put Nurglings in for like 5 games. It's like they don't do anything, they cost points, they're not obsec. Like, why? They're not infantry. They just don't do anything. And then Siegs proceeded to take a variety of different factions. Like, whether it's Votan with a 10 Hearthguard deep striking into my army's deployment zone turn 1 and just taking over my deployment zone. Or it's, I don't know, just pick your Siegs army, but it was bad and it was happening to me.
Yeah, it was stealth suits with Tau crisis suits coming in.
Crisis suits. Yeah.
I just basically was like, Nick, you need to take Nurglings. And then after the first game, he was like, yeah, I probably do. Second list, he didn't have Nurglings, so I just did it again. Third time, he was like, all right, this is not happening again. We're playing out a game. And I'm kind of with some of my armies, like Admech. I really want infiltrating units because I want to be able to push this back.
Yeah, it's a lesson you have to learn the hard way, but these types of stratagems really, they are the reason that you include infiltrating units. They just are.
We got Justin here with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Justin. I used Ravenous with my Chaos Knights in a local tournament, and when I used it at the right moment, it definitely made my opponent cry. It was worth it for the CP for sure. It's like a sleeper stratagem. It really shocks me that people just don't spam this out. Now, there are some armies where it's not quite effective. There are some really high leadership armies and ones that can ignore leadership modifiers. But against the vast majority of them, it's a brutal strat to play multiple times.
You don't have to use it every turn, but you really can use it in a lot of... I'll give you a great example, because you did give us a nice $10 super chat, and we appreciate you, Justin. I played at the semifinals of the Warzone Atlanta tournament. I was playing Eldar, I was playing against Chaos Knights. And I did a really clever trick where I made 5 Howling Banshees OBSEC, and I sprinted them right onto an objective that had a War Dog on it. Now, I am 5 OBSEC models, and he counts as 5 OBSEC models. This objective is contested, which is all I was going for. And in the charge phase, my opponent looked at me, and he's like, you going to charge those Banshees in? And I said, no, thank you, because I was like, I'm going to charge him, I'm going to do some damage, not kill it. He's going to kick one of my Banshees in the face, and then I'll be a 4-man to his 5-man. So I opted not to charge, and then he decided to not Ravenous Terror Shades at me. Honestly, I don't even think he thought about it, which blew my brains. But had he Ravenous Terror Shades me in that moment, I could have lost a singular Banshee pretty easily based on just a roll-off, and then all of a sudden that's an objective swing. So, use the strats.
Use it. 1 CP strats, that's your bread and butter.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to number 5 here. So this is one that I pretty much, it's extremely spammable. So 1 CP, Ancestral Sentence. This is a Votan strat. If your opponent's unit, a target unit, has a Judgment token, it's either the shooting or the fight phase, you can reroll hits. Just Chapter Master for 1 CP on a target unit. This stratagem opens up being able to use multiple land forts, because one of them gets +1 to hit, the second one gets full rerolls, and both of them are at basic max efficiency. You can use this on Hearthguard, you can use it on anything that wants, pretty much anything wants full rerolls. Berserks luckily have a different strat that is full rerolls, so you don't even have to use that one with them, which opens up being able to have 2 different units with full rerolls going into combat. This strat is amazing. I literally use it almost every single turn. It's just go 1 CP, 1 CP, 1 CP, 1 CP, done. Almost every single turn.
Part of the reason I included a Fate Weaver in my demon army was he gets me access to the Agent's Effect ability, which makes the strat increase by 1 in cost after the first time you use it. And this is the strat in Votan that I want to Vect. Oh my god, you're using this every turn. People pay out the wazoo for Chapter Masters and Abaddons and all kinds of really good stuff, and that's to get a core unit rerolls to hits. And then you're like, Land Fortress, +1 to hit, active full to your reroll hits, beams, beams, beams. It's not good. It's not good.
It's really good. It's really good, trust me. The strat is ludicrously good. I'm shocked that it's 1 CP. What you can do, because it's 1 CP, is if your opponent, if the target that you want to hit doesn't have a judgment token, you use your bike unit with the searchlight stratagem, light them up, put a judgment token on there, then 1 CP full rerolls to hit. So, you can have a 3-man bike unit get an angle on a unit, and then your 6-man bike unit activate, or the land fort, like we said, gets an angle and does it Hearthguard. Just, you blow people up. It's absolutely amazing strat.
You blow Nick up.
It's one of the most spammable strats in the game, and it kind of defines the efficiency of Votan.
Yeah, especially when you combine this with just judgment tokens.
Yep.
So it hits of 4s, 5s, 6s, depending on how many, or all auto wounds, and they're like, I'm just gonna reroll anything that's not more wounds.
Yeah, as soon as I have 2 to 3, I'm just like, I'll just.
You're transhuman, only wounds on 4s. You're -1 to wound, no reroll wounds. Whatever. I hit you, and you're dead.
What a great chat. Lewis Patton with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Lewis. Thanks for the content, guys. How many squads of stealth suits and crisis battle suits would you recommend for Farsight list in Arks of Omen? I wouldn't run more than 1 stealth suit unit because they start to get pricey. But 1 with Home and Beacon, a 3-man crisis unit, and a 5-man is perfectly viable. And I think that's a really good balance.
Nice. Appreciate your super chat, Lewis.
Yep, that's what I would do if I was playing FSE. Mm-hmm. All right, we're moving on to number 4.
Top half.
We're combining these 2 strats because they're almost always used in combination, and they are from the Adeptus Custodes. Custodes have some utterly amazing stratagems, and this could have been the Custodes show, where we just show off tons and tons of Custodes strats because they have ludicrously good ones. We didn't do that because we wanted some amount of diversity, but just let that be known here. Custodes have ludicrously good strats. One of the best suites of strats in the game, in my opinion. So, the 2 that stand out and that are the most spammable are their Transhuman stratagem, Arcane Genetic Alchemy. You can only wound a unit on 4s, 5s, and 6s, unmodified. And then Emperor's Auspices is turn off rerolls, so no rerolls to hit, wound, or damage rolls. When you have, this has been commonly used in Arks of Omen with large units of Wardens, which are 3 wound models that have T5, 4-up invuln, 2-up armor save. They could be counting as in cover, or light cover, or dense cover. And once you start throwing in a transhuman and no rerolls, the unit is a complete bear to deal with. And they have a 6-up Phenopain, the Wardens. It's a problem. There are not too many armies. Like, you can take the shootiest armies in the game, and they would be lucky to kill even half the unit.
I mean, you've seen Custodes putting up W's all across the world now. Liam Hackett just took 20 Wardens to the Adelaide Uprising in Australia, and just on the back of these 2 strats, basically made the 20 Wardens unkillable for long enough that they just camped out on objectives and said, all of the primary is mine, and I don't give up secondaries, have fun.
Yeah, because you cannot deal with these units efficiently. There just isn't really an army that can do it that well. You could run them in a defensive styles Emperor's Chosen to have 4-up Phenopain against mortals, which is one of the main tools to use against Custodes. Or you can use Solar Watch to get the speed and be able to multi-wrap things, which Liam was doing. He was like, oh, you have 3 units here? I'm going to wrap 2 of them and kill the 3rd one, and guess what? Desperate Breakout doesn't matter to me anymore. So, all the tricks here, but Custodes, it is just very difficult to deal with. There's only a couple armies in the game that really can try and deal with Wardens, and that's having a ton of volume of attacks.
And
of high AP.
It doesn't just have to be Wardens. Like, it's Wardens were the unit of choice that Liam used, but you take any Custodes unit, like a 3-man shield guard, you're like, okay, they're not trying to make this a Death Star. I'm gonna go attack this turn and try to kill this. Actually, these strats still apply, and all of a sudden
they're cheaper.
You have to way overcommit to killing it, or you just don't kill it, and then they're obsec, and then they still have their banner raised, and you're like, what the hell was this? And you probably lost.
Yeah, I've seen MSU Custodes lists that just spam out the 1 CB version of these strats because they're using it on smaller units. And
back
totally
in the day,
well.
These things used to be on bikes and stuff, and then like I remember I shot my entire GSC army at a unit of 5 Custodes bikes with these strats, and I killed 1. I was like, what the hell is this game? Why do I even play? And then thankfully they FAQ'd that because they know better. But strats are still, like, if you're reliant on rerolls or like wounding on 2s to get your job done, get them out of here.
It's gonna be a struggle. All right, heading over to the next one, which is also a suite of style, kind of stratagem styles, and it is going to be Fire and Fade type rules. So Tau have one called Strike and Fade. That is 1 CP, or 2 if you run 6 Crisis Suits, which nobody does really. Fire and Fade is 2 CP. It used to be before Arks of Omen. It was once per game. It was restricted to once per game. They've removed that one, which is a very interesting decision, honestly.
Yeah.
Because it's such a powerful strat. But this is one of the most spammable strats in the game because it means your key damage dealing unit is essentially safe every single turn.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, you take your unit on 9 jet bikes, you load them up with the shuriken cannons, you make it Hail of Doom, you cast Guide, you cast Doom. I don't need to teach you how to play Eldar here, but the number one trick to this combo that keeps it working for more than one turn is Fire and Fade. It just take your unit, put it right behind a wall, pre-measure. It's something we teach you how to do so that when you go 7 inches or 6 inches back behind your wall, you have a place to land. Don't fill it up with your own models. Made that mistake once, never again. And you shoot your unit. You go back behind the wall, you rinse, and you repeat. That's the bread and butter of the strat. Just you shoot, you don't get shot back, shoot and skew. It's game defining because most armies in 40k, when they put a unit out there, it is exposed. They've done their damage, and now they're vulnerable to the world. And this just doesn't play by the same give and take that everything else does. There's also a lot of really clever uses that you can use Fire and Fade for, and this will apply to not just Eldari, but Drukhari have it, Harlequins have it. Space Marines with Eliminators can produce the Fire and Fade effect with those Instigator Bolt Carbines, and of course Tau. Red Corsairs have Fire and Fade, So get creative with it, and what you can do is use it to basically move 7 inches after you're done attacking somebody. Go take an objective. Go create a move block. Go be in a different spot because it's essentially just move twice as well. Like if you just think about it as like 2 CP, move again, warp time. That's in a million different uses you could have for that.
Yeah, and a recent example of me, I use Strike and Fade pretty much every single time. That's what one of my CP is saved for, is to always potentially do Strike and Fade with Tau. But it just works on jetpack units, so I moved a Riptide 12-inch. I teleported a Gold Star to get an angle on one of Nick's characters, and then I needed some sort of screen in front of that. So moved a Riptide 12, used Strike and Fade on it, and then used the 2d6 move from the Nova boost, and just got him over there in front of the Cold Star and tried to create a defensive formation. This can stack with other movement-related kind of rules.
And you can use it on units that you don't really think about using it on. Like, I've used it on Kronos before. I rolled a 6 on advance on a unit of Kronos. It's actually against Siegs. And I just flew them 14 inches forward, shot the random weapons, moved another 7. It's like, I just took a unit of 3 Kronos, the big mutated monsters in Drukhari, just moved it 20 inches, put him behind a wall in his own deployment zone. And it's like, wow, guess you didn't see that coming.
Then you did need a 6 to get back there fully.
Rolled that 6.
Yeah, you did. You really did. So the amazing stratagems. They're so spammable in the fact that it is game defining having access to something like this. And there's a lot of standard shooting armies that struggle to deal with the Strike and Fade type armies.
Include Fate Weaver so you can vect this one.
It's definitely vecting it. Although Nick was a jerk in our game and vected my acted full profile, which was a type of stratagem we considered adding onto this list because it can be very powerful, especially like on a big night. But it was going to be in that honorable mention category.
There's a lot of 1 CP strats that we're considering put this on, like the 4-up deny strats, the act at full profile strats, 6-inch heroic strats. All of them are amazing, and you're going to use them when the situation calls for it, for sure. But they don't define your faction's ability to play or define the game and how it's played. They're very useful, and they deserve a mention for that. But that's all they get.
All right, moving on to number 2. I did actually name drop it earlier, and it is Counter Offensive. Another generic strat. It's 2 CP, so it's on the pricier side, but talk about a game-defining strat.
Yeah, so
this is often referred to as the interrupt stratagem.
How 40k works in close combat is basically the charger gets to go first. And if you have a lot of charges, let's say you're playing your Orc army or your Blood Angel army or your Chaos Marine army, and you hit like this charge, this charge, this charge, this charge, it's your go turn. You're going to go hit Siegs in the face. Unfortunately, Siegs, the Maestro over here, if he didn't spend all of his command points making units fearless with insane bravery, he could still have 2 CP available to him for the counter-offensive strat to interrupt that chain of command, that order of flow. So I'm going to start with my first unit, and I'm going to kill one of his Siegs' squads, and then I'm going to continue down my line. But wait! Oh no! I've been countered offensively, and they go kill my unit, disrupting my tempo, ruining my plan, and making me sad. It makes engaging more than one unit in a turn very challenging in close combat, because then you are vulnerable to the counter-offensive strat. And just the threat of that alone can swing games and create opportunities for plays. And then if you actually do get to use it and just swing a combat, it feels good.
Now, imagine this scenario, right, Nick? There's a huge damage-dealing unit that you want to engage very carefully, right? Maybe it's strung out a bit, so you're going to send units in very carefully, so one unit is just within engagement range, and only one model could swing back if there's an interrupt, right? And you're going to base a bunch of other models.
Bunch of tactics.
And then maybe you engaged, like a screening troop unit kind of right next to that with a different unit. Well, you're going to go do your careful swings on that unit, make sure the damage dealer dies. But guess what? All of a sudden, I'm going to spend, on my turn, I'm not going to interrupt with the damage dealer. That one's probably already dead, mostly dead from the first hit. Instead, I'm going to use it on that troop unit, go up there and start basing your own models, get onto objectives, and now maybe that's the unit you wanted to try and trap in combat, prevent from, doing things. Now, all of a sudden, it's touching an objective, and you have to put all your swings that way instead of finishing off this key damage dealer. There's a lot of tricks you can do with if they engage multiple units to either base opponents' models, get onto objectives when you otherwise wouldn't have. Just a lot of trickery that can happen. It's not always the damage dealer you want to interrupt with. It might be a different utility unit that can get you a lot of points or help your damage dealer survive.
One of my favorite tricks, Mr. Siegs, is when I'm playing Drakari, you're just any transport-based army, and let's say they create that scenario, right, where they charge, like, my Incubi, and they're going to start fighting my Incubi, because you don't want to get interrupted by Incubi.
Unless they fight last.
But maybe they've also charged my Raider, and they're planning to just charge my Raider so they can pile and consolidate around my Raider for some movement and go contest my objective. My Raider's not going to kill anything. Well, they're going to start on my Incubi. Sure, I pick those guys up. Now I'm going to spend 2 CP to interrupt with my Raider. And my Raider can't kill anything. We already covered that. But not only can it move forward and base your models before you've based my models, before you piled and consolidated. So now you're not on the objective because I engaged you like that. I base contacted you, can no longer consolidate. But I can also swivel my very big fly transport in up to basically 6 inches between pile and consolidates. And that rear end or the side end or whatever in my swivel is now in a totally different spot. And guess what? It's going into my turn. And I can disembark out of that rear end and I'm closer to you and the game's over because a succubus is inside your army.
Yeah, I mean, when Nick gets his rear end in all sorts of new places, it can be dangerous.
We get that rear end everywhere.
All right, so that's counter-offensive. Let's move on to the number 1 stratagem combo in the game. It is straight up broken.
Whoa. We gotta take guesses. Does anyone have guesses on what this could possibly be? Leave them in the comments.
If you've played against this faction in the last couple of months, last 2 months really, you probably have faced this combination of rules, and it is absurdly broken. And it is completely game-defining at the top tables right now, in terms of like how you have to think about practice. It's primarily used on one particular unit, but guess what? It can be used on a couple different ones. You ready for this?
Please.
All right, it is overcharged las cells, which was mentioned previously, and ingrained precision, both from the Astra Militarum. You often see this combination of rules, along with other ones like full rerolls to wounds, with Castrican, which is an elite infantry unit that is core and benefits from these rules. But essentially the combination is your hit rolls of 5 or 6 to hit, unmodified, count as 6s to wound. And you might say, every time that the Games Workshop has created a rule like this where hit rolls equal some sort of special wound roll, it's been broken. Like throughout 9th edition, anytime any amount of hit rolls count as a 6 to wound and 6s to wound do something, in which case overcharged las cells means they are a mortal wound. And guess what? Normally these strats are capped at just 6 total.
Or 3.
Or 3 like Necrons. And 3, 6, that's reasonable. 6 is pretty solid.
Pretty high, yeah.
But at the same time, this stratagem, unfortunately, is not 6 total mortal wounds that you can do. It's 6 per targeted unit. So if you split fire into 3 different units and you put all your shots in different places, you can do up to 6 mortals to, 1 Custody Dreadnought, 2 Custody Dreadnought, 3 Custody Dreadnought. And it's been mathed out by Mr. Jack and John, and I trust them on that, that you can actually, if you split fire the most efficiently and put all the buffs on the Castrican, including these 2 strats, you can, on average, kill 3 Custody Dreadnoughts, which is absurdly broken. That is...
For one unit, it's a 100-point unit.
Yeah, it's
5-point units, yeah.
It's so cheap.
So the way the whole combo works is basically guard, of course, have that rule 6 to hit, automatically wound. And then the rule counts as a 6 to hit, counts as a 6 to wound, and then 6 is to wound immortals. And then they have a +1 to hit here, which works because it's not unmodified. So
full rerolls.
full rerolls to hit, 5s to hit, automatically wound. That's a save at AP -2. You know, these things do just hurt. So enjoy that strength 3 auto wound on a 5+ with rerolls to hit. So 55% of your shots are just going to create wounds and also create a mortal wound. So the unit shoots, 20 shots, 30 shots? Who cares? Doesn't matter. You're dead.
Yeah, and on top of that, you could have this lovely little banner nearby. It's an aura of ignoring abilities that prevent them from losing wounds. So like Feel No Pains or Phase Caps, -1 damage. Games Workshop decided to include
This is really
that.
where I have some gripes, okay? You know, you design things like mortal wounds, and it's like, this is designed to just go through everything in the game. You know, there's no saves here. They're very rare, they're very powerful. Let's give them to everybody all the time. Okay, let's create Feel No Pain. We put too many mortals in the game, so now we have Feel No Pain. It's a mechanic that allows you to stay alive even through mortals. All right, well, Feel No Pain is too good. Let's create some phase caps, and you can only take so much damage in the shooting phase, so when you play against guard, you can't just die. Well, what are guards supposed to do? Well, let's give them a banner, and then the banner ignores the Feel No Pains and the phase caps. It's like, what was the point of
and
all these
-1
rules?
damage. Games Workshop added that in Arks of Omen for no reason whatsoever. I don't know why that FAQ had to be ruled that way. Nobody was playing it as it affected -1 damage, and they were like, just add that on there. Let's tack that on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of crazy. That's called the Finial. It's not a stratagem, but it's the best relic in the game, in my opinion.
Maybe in a top 10 relic list, we'll put that in there.
So this combination needs to be fixed.
It's-
I've been waiting for a guard FAQ. I've been waiting for them to change this interaction. At minimum, they need to change overcharged las cells to be capped at 6 mortals total.
I don't think that's enough. I really
I don't think that's enough,
I-
but let's start there. And then
5s to hit, auto wounding into mortals. Forget if it's just 6. It's too many wounds. You're making me take too many saves for too little effort.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed about it. Also, the unit can teleport. I didn't mention that one.
Oh yeah, of course it can. It can teleport, and your other squad can get out of a Torox after the Torox's move. So, you know, that's just like, you have a 20-inch drive-by threat range, you have a teleport threat range. Like, are you safe? Maybe in the backest corner of your ruin. That's where the mortars get you.
Now, somehow Astra Militarum don't have an absurd win rate, and I think that's just due to the fact that it does require some skill to pilot the rest of the army around this. But the Kasrkin bomb, as it's called, is just straight up broken.
We're already seeing Astra Militarum's win rate start to rise. I think from when
this past weekend.
Yeah, I think it's definitely taking a little bit of a learning curve, and Arks is brand new. So do not put too much stock into any singular weekend, especially right after LVO. A lot of the players that are competitive and go to LVO, they take some time for themselves the week after LVO, 2 weeks after LVO, and don't just go to another super major. Not everybody is Jack and John, but I would definitely try to just take it with a grain of salt.
A lot of big tournaments coming up. Cherokee, there's Cherokee Open, there's Adepticon coming up soon, and then we've got a whole suite of Games Workshop tournaments. So we're gonna see how this plays out. I'm still hoping that they just preemptively address this in the FAQ, which apparently is lost in the warp somewhere. But just getting rid of this silly combo, as you hear it explained, you're like, how is that even existing? But if this is gone, I think the game is in a dramatically better place.
You know what's in a better place? Us, after we receive Tao Q's £5 super chat.
Thank you so much for your super chat. What are your thoughts on Repentulous Bloody Rose? With Astra Militarum mortars around, they just die before getting in combat. Lean into Sacrosanct, Zephyrum, thanks. I think all of the above. I would still take some amount of Repentia. Maybe you don't take 3 units of 9.
Yeah.
Maybe you take only 1 or 2 units. And against guard, you don't really need the fight on death. And
I think
just move them up in transports.
At a minimum, you think you really want a 9-man in a Rhino, 9 women in a Rhino, and that's going to be them not mortared. You know, the Rhino's pretty tough to mortar out. And then they can project an even bigger threat range with a 3-inch disembark adding to their move characteristic. And then you have Miracle Dice to add on top of that. That's been a great staple for me whenever I played Sisters. And it's a thing I would include in pretty much every Sisters list. And then after that, I might look at like 2 units of 4 or 5 Repentia that maybe in some games where I'm not playing against indirect fire can skirmish. And in other games they can outflank and free strategic reserves, hit some Miracle Dice charges just to create some different tempos. I think they're too good from an offense to point ratio where it doesn't even really matter if they die. Like it does because they're a unit you took, but they're cheap enough that it's not the end of the world, and they're just so valuable that I would just continue running them.
Using rhinos, you lose access to the command phase advance and charge, but if you use the rhino to get up into the middle of the table, you don't need advance and charge as much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a trade-off there. Keep them alive against. If guard is all over your meta and there's mortars everywhere, then I would think about making that type of change.
All right, well, that's the whole kit and caboodle. That's them list right there. Hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did. We had a blast doing this tier list for you. We're coming up with the different strats.
Like we said, we had like a list of 25 plus that could have potentially made it on here. There's a lot of really good strats in the game. There's also a ton of strats I read that are completely and utterly never used.
Yeah, there really are. Maybe a bottom 10 strats tier list.
There's some bad ones, man.
Let us know what you thought in the comments. If you think that we were right, if you think Zeke is wrong about his command point reroll disrespect, if you think that I was obviously right about it, if you think we're handsome. You know, the algorithm gods don't really care. Just put a comment there.
Yep. Watch the video, tell your friends about it, leave a comment, and also, if you want to see some of we kind of went briefly through some advanced concepts in here with the counteroffensive stratagem, with the transport wrapping. If you want to hear more about those, check out the War Room. We have done advanced strategy sessions, 10-minute tips on a variety of advanced level skills. Nick has done a large suite of strategy sessions that deals with them as well. So if you want like really good tactics and strategy videos, check out the War Room below in the link. There's a free 3-day trial, so just click it, test it out. You can cancel before the end of the trial if you don't like it, but guess what? The vast majority of people who have tried it have in fact converted to subs, and we're delighted to have all these new members with us. So just give it a chance, tell your friends about it, click that link, free 3-day trial, and you can watch as many videos as you want. There's no limit on that. If you sign up through our own platform, the Worm platform, you also get access to our new mobile apps on iOS and Android as well.
And just reminding everybody, there is a link below. You get access to the best players in the world at your fingertips. We're all on a Discord server. It's very positive. We just try to teach you competitive Warhammer. Literally probably over 1,000 hours of content centered around competitive Warhammer, all organized by factions. You got it. You want it. We make it. Check it out in the Worm. Link below. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Having amazing terrain can absolutely transform your experience playing Warhammer 40k. Nobody wants to play on cardboard cutouts, broken pink hills, pieces of paper, when you have amazing 3D printed terrain from Terrainify at your disposal. This beautiful terrain comes fully built and painted in one of 22 different camo settings. You can also get it unpainted so you can make it your own hobby project, as well as just the printed STL files, so that way you can print them at home yourself. Terrainify has so many different kinds of boards. They have different themes for whatever kind of battle you could possibly want to create. We've used Terrainify in our games to play a very functional, high-level competitive Warhammer. This terrain is both beautiful, fun to play with, and very user-friendly. Terrainify is on a mission to elevate the quality of terrain that people play with worldwide. If you want to play on better terrain, you can support them directly on Patreon for just $3 a month. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to Terrainify.com, use discount code ArtofWar25 for 25% off your order, and start creating the boards you've always wanted to play on.